Hi, I'm Daniel, 41, and last month my life blew up in a courtroom that was supposed to destroy someone else. The judge looked bored. That bored, flat expression family court judges wear like armor, because every case is someone sobbing, begging, accusing. But when my ex-mother-in-law opened her mouth, the courtroom got deadly quiet. She's mentally unstable, Constance declared from the stand, her voice all tremble and tact. Erratic behavior, mood swings, neglecting the children while she obsesses over her work. She even had the audacity to dab a tissue to the corner of her eye like she'd seen in a courtroom drama. My ex-father-in-law, Harold, followed with a stack of supporting statements from their country club friends, all of whom had likely never even met Elena for more than 3 minutes at a holiday function. My ex, Marcus, Harvard Law, big firm partner, salt and pepper hair that women seemed to lose their minds over, sat at the petitioner's table like a smug statue. The man was already mentally painting the children's new bedrooms in his parents' guest wing. Sophia gets the room with the bay window. Michael can have the one with the nautical theme. They weren't here for the children. They were here for the story. The legacy. The Morrison family narrative. And then the court-appointed psychologist stood up unexpectedly, and everything shifted. Your Honor, she said, clearing her throat. Before I present my evaluation, I need to make a disclosure. Judge Patterson looked up, finally. Proceed, Dr. Williams. I recognize the respondent, she said, gesturing toward Elena, sitting calmly in her gray blazer like someone who'd already seen this scene before, just from the other side of the courtroom. She's Dr. Elena Petrova, the forensic psychologist who trained me during my residency at Johns Hopkins. Marcus's face twitched for the first time. She literally wrote the textbook we use for competency evaluations in family court proceedings. Dr. Williams continued. Her protocols are the gold standard. The room froze. Let me back up. Elena Petrova is my sister. And she's the smartest person I've ever met in my life. Grew up dirt poor, Eastern European immigrant family, full scholarship to Columbia, double doctorate in clinical and forensic psych. She doesn't cry in public. She doesn't panic. And she doesn't lose. She also never expected to be sitting in a courtroom as the defendant in a competency hearing. When she divorced Marcus 2 years ago, after catching him sleeping with his firm's paralegal, she walked away with the house, full custody, and no drama. She didn't even torch him professionally, which she could have. She just wanted peace for the kids. But peace doesn't fit the Morrison family brand. So when the petition landed, full emergency custody, allegations of mental instability, unsafe home environment, I knew this wasn't about concern. This was a hostile takeover. The kind with witnesses, affidavits, lawyers on retainers, and whispered strategy meetings at the country club. But here's what they didn't know. They picked the wrong woman to frame. They picked the woman who trained the entire system. And the moment her former student stood up in court, every carefully plotted lie the Morrisons had curated began to unravel. The moment court recessed for lunch, I cornered Elena outside the courthouse. How the hell are you so calm? I hissed, gripping the edge of the bench like it might keep me from flipping over the nearest table. She didn't even flinch. Because this isn't about emotion, she said, pulling a granola bar from her tote. It's about evidence. Constance just told the court you were going to have a nervous breakdown and burn the house down with the kids inside. She also told the court evaluator that I speak to spirits through the dishwasher steam. Elena replied, unwrapping the bar. So, not exactly credible. I stared at her. You're eating? In the middle of a custody ambush? I skipped breakfast. Emotional resilience requires glucose. That's my sister. Cool under fire. But I could see the tension hiding in the corners of her eyes. This wasn't a normal case, and we both knew it. The Morrisons had weaponized the court system, and Elena's career, hell, her identity, was on trial right alongside her right to raise her children. She'd once told me, custody cases aren't about who's right. They're about who builds the more believable story. And Constance Morrison was spinning one hell of a tale. After lunch, court resumed. Dr. Williams presented her findings with surgical precision. Her voice never wavered. She didn't editorialize. Just facts. Interviews. Documentation. Patterns of behavior. Elena had passed every metric. Emotional stability. Parental attachment. Psychological consistency. There wasn't a single red flag. But then came the twist. The statements provided by the petitioners, Dr. Williams said, contained multiple contradictions. Upon follow-up, 2 of the witnesses admitted to being coached. There was an audible inhale across the courtroom. Constance looked like someone had yanked her pearls off mid-sentence. Marcus shifted in his seat, jaw locked, as if trying to calculate whether it was too late to backpedal. The coaching, Dr. Williams continued, originated from Mrs. Constance Morrison. I glanced at Judge Patterson. Her pen had stopped moving. But the real bombshell hadn't even dropped yet. Dr. Williams cleared her throat again. In my evaluation, I also found consistent indicators of something called parental alienation, a deliberate attempt to turn the children against their mother through fear-based narratives. What does that mean, exactly? The judge asked, her tone suddenly colder. Dr. Williams opened a file. It means the grandparents told a 12-year-old girl that her mother might be institutionalized. That her mental state made her dangerous. That if she stayed with her, she could be harmed. It means they told an 8-year-old boy that his mother didn't love him. You could feel the air get heavy in the courtroom. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a bad custody case. This was psychological abuse. Sophia and Michael, Elena's kids, my niece and nephew, had been quietly terrorized by people they were told to trust. All to paint Elena as a villain in a narrative that served the Morrisons' egos. And here's the kicker, if Dr. Williams hadn't recognized Elena and gone digging deeper than normal, they might have gotten away with it. As Dr. Williams laid out the full extent of the manipulation, complete with direct quotes from the children and time-stamped interview notes, I watched Marcus's composure crack. He leaned forward to whisper something to his attorney. Probably, how bad is this? Answer, real bad. Because the next words out of Dr. Williams' mouth were, I recommend not only dismissing the petition, but initiating an investigation into the psychological harm caused by the petitioners themselves. And suddenly, the predators looked a lot more like prey. When Judge Patterson returned from chambers that afternoon, the entire courtroom shifted like it knew something irreversible was coming. She didn't look tired anymore. She looked furious. She adjusted her glasses, folded her hands, and stared directly at Marcus. This court has reviewed the full evaluation, including the appended transcripts and corroborating documentation submitted by Dr. Williams. Marcus nodded, lips pursed like he was about to object to something that hadn't even been said yet. The findings are deeply troubling, she continued. Not about the respondent, but about the petitioners. Boom. That was the moment. That was the axis on which the entire case turned, where the victim became the accuser, and the accusers realized they'd built their own gallows out of sworn affidavits and overconfidence. The judge turned to Constance. Mrs. Morrison, you coached witnesses to fabricate instability. You encouraged your grandchildren to believe their mother was mentally ill and dangerous. You attempted to sever the children's emotional attachment to their primary caregiver through false narratives. Constance opened her mouth, but the judge raised a hand. Do not interrupt me. I've seen hundreds of custody cases. This is the most grotesque misuse of the process I've encountered in 2 decades. Then she turned to Marcus. You, sir, sat in this courtroom as your parents submitted manipulated testimony. You allowed your own children to be psychologically damaged in the name of narrative control. He stood abruptly. Your Honor, I was not aware of the extent. Sit down. And that was the only time I've ever seen a Harvard-educated lawyer physically obey a command like it came from God himself. I'm issuing immediate orders. Judge Patterson went on. This petition is dismissed with prejudice. Mr. Morrison, your alternating weekend visitation is suspended pending a full psychological reassessment. Visitation may resume only under supervision, and only after documented progress is made in family counseling. I heard Constance gasp like she'd just been sentenced to death, not restricted from brunching with her grandchildren. As for Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, the judge continued, turning slowly toward the white-haired couple who suddenly looked like wax figures. This court is recommending formal sanctions. You are barred from unsupervised contact with Sophia and Michael effective immediately. Then she added the final nail, the one I'm sure still echoes in their nightmares. Let the record show that the petitioners attempted to strip custody from the author of the very standards by which such cases are judged, and were caught using the very tools she helped design. Elena sat motionless. No smirk. No fist pump. Just a slow, silent exhale, like the pressure had been pulled out of her lungs by force. I didn't say anything. I just reached over and squeezed her shoulder. That was the moment the war ended. But it was also the moment the aftermath began. Because even when justice hits like a sledgehammer, the pieces still have to be picked up one by one. The courthouse was mostly empty when we walked out. Just the usual pigeons loitering near the steps and the obligatory local news van pretending not to be interested. Elena didn't say much. She just handed me her keys and got in the passenger seat like someone who had been holding her body up with adrenaline and didn't quite trust her legs anymore. Home? I asked. No, she said. Kids' school. They need to hear it from me before they hear it from anyone else. The drive was quiet. She stared out the window, jaw clenched. Elena doesn't cry. Not in public, not in private, maybe not even in the shower. But I could tell she was unraveling slowly, like a thread pulled from the edge of a perfect suit. At the school, we sat in the counselor's office with Sophia and Michael. The counselor hovered awkwardly at her desk, pretending to check email while obviously eavesdropping. Elena sat between them and took both their hands. It's over, she said softly. The court heard everything. The truth came out. Sophia blinked, cautious. They believed you? They believed us, Elena corrected gently. Because you were brave enough to speak honestly, even when it was confusing. I'm so proud of you. Michael twisted in his chair. So, I don't have to go back to Grandpa's house? Elena shook her head. Not unless you decide to someday, when you're older. And only if you feel safe. He slumped against her side like his whole skeleton had been bracing for something that finally didn't happen. Sophia, on the other hand, wasn't done. They said you were sick. That you might go away forever. That you didn't love us. Elena didn't flinch. They were wrong. And they said those things because they wanted to scare you. To control the story. Why? Because if they could make you afraid, then you'd need them. They thought if they made me look bad enough, you wouldn't want me anymore. Sophia's voice was quiet but sharp. They lied? Yes. And lies like that leave scars. But knowing the truth helps heal them. The counselor wiped her eyes and pretended she had allergies. I didn't even pretend. I just turned around and stared at a character counts poster for a minute while I pulled myself together. Later that night, we sat in Elena's kitchen. She poured 2 glasses of wine and passed me one. I never thought I'd end up on the other side of my own system, she said. All those years teaching other evaluators how to spot lies, and then I had to pray someone would spot the ones being used against me. I nodded. You built a fortress. They just didn't know you were inside it. She smiled weakly. They underestimated who they were dealing with. No, I said. They underestimated who they were dealing against. That was their mistake. Elena looked at me like she might actually cry, but of course she didn't. Instead, she lifted her glass. To survival. To revenge by protocol. I added. We clinked. The next morning, the story hit the news cycle. Not because we called anyone, but because someone inside the courthouse leaked the transcript. And once the local reporters realized the woman falsely accused of being unfit was the literal author of the state's evaluation standards, it spread like wildfire. Elena became the face of something she never asked to represent, the parent targeted by lies. The expert caught in the crosshairs. The woman who beat the system with the system. But fame isn't healing. Not for her. Not for the kids. Not for anyone who walked through that fire. And we weren't even halfway through it. The news cycle was brutal. Not for us. Elena was portrayed like some kind of forensic Joan of Arc, but for the Morrisons? It was a public relations bloodbath. By Tuesday, local headlines were calling it the custody coup that backfired. One blog even photoshopped Constance into a Game of Thrones poster with the caption, "When you play the family court game, you win or you get sanctioned." I laughed. Elena didn't. This isn't funny, she said, scrolling through the article while stirring her tea. This is my children's trauma in clickbait font. But it's also your vindication. She sighed. Yeah. Except Marcus's parents still believe they're the victims. And she was right. Constance and Harold doubled down. Interviews, editorials, carefully curated crocodile tears on daytime TV. We were only trying to protect the children. Constance sniffed in one segment, with pearl earrings and Botox sincerity. The comments section told a different story. You tried to take her kids using forged evidence. You're not protectors. You're just old-school manipulators with a lawyer on speed dial. Elena Petrova should be running the entire family court system. Imagine trying to take down the woman who wrote the damn textbook. Peak boomer delusion. The public wasn't buying their act. But Marcus was quieter. A week after the ruling, he showed up at Elena's doorstep. I just want to talk. he said, standing on the porch like a college student trying to return a hoodie after ghosting someone. Elena didn't even open the screen door. You had your chance to talk. You had 3 months of hearings and 6 years of marriage to speak up. You picked silence. I didn't know what they were doing. No, she said, calm and flat. You didn't want to know. There's a difference. He swallowed. I thought they were just exaggerating. That you were working too much. That may be the stress. You watched your mother accuse me of being mentally unstable in front of our children. And you smiled. That landed. He looked away, ashamed, but not enough. I'm in therapy now, he said. Court mandated, obviously. But it's helping. Elena raised an eyebrow. You want credit for compliance? I want a second chance to be a father. She stared at him. Long enough for it to become uncomfortable. Then she spoke quietly. You don't get to second chance your way out of this. You let your parents psychologically terrorize Sophia and Michael. You let them weaponize your children because it served your ego. You don't fix that with a few therapy sessions and a sad porch speech. He nodded slowly. Okay. I deserve that. No, she said. You earned that. And then she closed the door. But here's the part no one saw. That night, Sophia heard the whole conversation from the hallway. And when Elena tucked her in, she asked, Mom, will he ever be normal again? Elena sat beside her. He might be better. If he does the work. And if he doesn't? Then supervised visits stay supervised. Sophia nodded, then said something that stopped us both. I don't think I want to see Grandma and Grandpa ever again. Not even with a therapist. Elena hesitated. You don't have to. Not until you decide. If ever. Sophia pulled the covers up. Good. Because I don't think people who lie about your mom deserve to be called grandparents. The strength in that 12-year-old girl hit me like a freight train. Stronger than I'd ever been at that age. Stronger than a lot of adults I know. The next morning, Michael asked if he could throw away the Lego set Grandpa gave him last Christmas. Why? I asked. Because every time I look at it, I remember he said you were going to a hospital and not coming back. Elena knelt beside him. Baby, you don't have to keep anything that makes you feel scared. You can let it go. He nodded. Okay. I want to let it go. And he did. Just like that. Piece by piece. 3 months later, things had settled, but not the way anyone expected. Marcus was still on supervised visitation, showing up twice a month with a court-appointed facilitator and a notebook full of talking points from his therapist. He wasn't bad at it, just clumsy. Like someone learning to speak a new language called parenthood after years of faking the accent. Sophia mostly tolerated him. Michael was cautiously affectionate. Kids that age are generous by default. But the damage lingered in the way he flinched when Marcus raised his voice even slightly. The court therapist called it emotional imprinting. I called it proof of harm. Meanwhile, Elena? She didn't just bounce back. She rebuilt. She rewrote 2 entire chapters of her textbook. Added a section on grandparent overreach, included anonymized case excerpts from her own hearing, and created a flowchart for spotting fabricated evidence in custody evaluations. A publisher offered to reissue the book as a second edition. You're really doing this? I asked one night as we sat on her porch, watching the kids build a ridiculous duct tape obstacle course in the yard. Why not? She said. They made me a case study. Might as well be a useful one. She paused, then added, most parents wouldn't have survived what I did. Not because they aren't strong, but because they don't have the language to defend themselves. They don't know how the system works. Or how it can be twisted. She wasn't wrong. If her evaluator had been anyone else, if Dr. Williams hadn't recognized her, hadn't dug deeper, hadn't questioned the curated version of concerned grandparents, this could have ended very differently. That haunted her more than she let on. I helped build this system, she said. And it almost destroyed me. How many other families has it failed? She started giving talks. Quietly at first, workshops, professional conferences, webinars for family court evaluators. Her face was never on the promo materials, but the words spread fast. Elena Petrova, the psychologist who beat the system using her own protocol. She became a myth. A cautionary tale with a doctorate. And the Morrisons? Their lawyer bailed on them 2 weeks after the sanctions. Too much public scrutiny. Too much liability. They tried to appeal. Every court said no. They tried to reframe the narrative online, Facebook posts, blog comments, even an open letter in a local magazine. But it was too late. Their lives were documented, dissected, and footnoted in a judicial ruling now cited in 3 separate family court workshops. And the kicker? Their names would appear, sanitized, of course, as part of a landmark case study on custody petition abuse in the next National Psychology Conference. Elena asked me if she should feel guilty about that. No, I said. They picked the fight. You just had the audacity to win it. Then one day, out of nowhere, Marcus called me. Not Elena. Me. He asked if I'd meet him for coffee. I said sure. Morbid curiosity, mostly. He looked older. Softer. Like therapy had finally excavated whatever part of him used to be decent. I didn't come to justify anything, he said. I came to say I was wrong. About everything. I raised an eyebrow. You sure you don't want to run that by a PR consultant first? He smiled faintly. I already lost my marriage, my kids' trust, and half my firm's clients. I don't have much left to protect. He paused. But I'm trying to be better. I studied him. For once, he didn't sound rehearsed. If you want a relationship with your kids, I said, that's your job now. Not a court's. Not Elena's. Not mine. Earn it. I will. He finished his coffee in silence and left. I didn't tell Elena about it for 3 days. When I finally did, she nodded and said, let's see if his actions last longer than his apologies. She wasn't bitter. Just realistic. But here's the part that got me. When Michael came home from school a week later, he showed Elena a drawing. It was him, holding her hand. She had a superhero cape. He titled it My Mom Saves Me from Bad Guys. No textbook in the world could top that. 3 years later, Elena's name is still whispered in legal circles, part legend, part warning, part blueprint. The case changed state policy. New legislation passed requiring equal scrutiny of petitioners in custody disputes, especially in cases involving grandparents. Her experience didn't just survive the headlines, it rewrote the rules. But that's not the victory she talks about. The real win is this: Sophia is 17 now. Sharp, sarcastic, and currently writing her college essay about resilience under systemic betrayal. Elena tried to convince her to choose a different title. She refused. Michael is 13. He doesn't talk much about the custody hearing anymore. But when he brings home art projects from school, he always draws the same thing: a small boy, holding his mother's hand. Their therapy continued for 2 years. And somewhere in that space, those quiet, uncomfortable rooms with couches too soft and clocks too loud, they healed. Slowly. Unevenly. But honestly. They chose not to resume contact with Constance and Harold. Not after the judge's restrictions were lifted. Not after the media forgot. Not after Marcus begged them to consider it. Michael said it best one night at dinner. They didn't try to fix what they broke. They just tried to say they didn't mean to break it. And that was that. Marcus, for his part, did the work. Real work. The kind you don't get credit for on social media or in court transcripts. He rebuilt trust one awkward conversation, one therapy session, one weekend visit at a time. He never got unsupervised visits back. He requested they stay supervised until the kids were ready. Eventually they were. Sophia forgave him before Michael did. But when Michael did, it was with that quiet, rare kind of forgiveness that sticks. Marcus never apologized to Elena directly again. He didn't have to. He showed up. Paid for the kids' therapy without court orders. Spoke at a conference on custody abuse beside her, admitting everything in front of 200 legal professionals. He cried. She didn't. And afterward they shook hands in front of a standing ovation. People still ask Elena how she survived it. How she stayed calm. How she didn't burn the entire Morrison family tree to ash. She always gives the same answer. I knew the truth. I just had to wait for the system to catch up. And when they ask about justice, she says, justice is what my children live in now. A life free of lies, fear, and control. A life they watched her fight for, and win. And me? I just keep telling people the story. Because the textbook wasn't enough. People need to hear what weaponized custody looks like. How it sounds. How it hides inside concerned voices and sanitized affidavits. They need to know it's real. And they need to know that it can be stopped. But only if you fight back with the truth, and refuse to flinch when they throw everything at you. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't fire or fury. It's protocol. And sometimes the most dangerous woman in the courtroom is the one who wrote the rules.